Thank you for pressing start on episode 8 of Underplayed, KZUM's indie video game podcast. Today we reveal and talk about 2 secret games, followed by a review of our featured game, Hyper Light Drifter. I'm Bo Po, and joining me is my player 2, DiscoCola. What is up, Disco?
Hey, Bo Po. Today we're talking about an awesome game.
Yes, I am so excited to talk about Wadham with you as my secret game, of course. So it'll be a great time. No, he's, of course, alluding to our featured review of Hyper Light Drifter, which will come at the end of our episode. Here on Underplayed, we review indie games of all kinds, the games with small budgets but big hearts, the lesser-known experiences with imaginative ideas. We will now begin the episode with our secret games.
The secret games, that you'll play. Yes. The secret games, the secret games.
In this segment, we each review one indie game we've been playing in secret since our last episode. We don't discuss our picks in advance. We keep them for a surprise. For this very moment, any indie game can be chosen as long as we have not talked about it on the show before. We'll start with you, Disco. I have no idea what your secret game is for episode 8. We don't talk about these things. I know you've been doing your darndest to try to pick a secret game that kind of coincides with our featured review each episode in some way. So I'm very curious about what you picked here for the episode where we're featuring Hyper Light Drifter. So reveal your secret game for episode 8 of Underplayed.
Well, it's a good thing that you picked Wadham because this time I actually didn't. Now, if you look in our little chat, you do see a trailer there for a game called Furi, and this is Furi spelled F-U-R-I. Furi.
Ah, okay. I think I have seen this. I've seen like cover art, but I don't think I've looked into this.
Yeah, and really cover art is sort of the initial draw here, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So Furi starts with your unnamed character suspended in a prison being abused by his jailer. As a result of that abuse, you fall into a bout of unconsciousness, and you wake up to a man in a rabbit hat telling you to wake up and escape from prison. You were given a sword and told to kill your jailer. And then this is the first fight and sort of acts as a tutorial in the cell-shaded boss rush game. Each boss has a unique set of abilities and patterns and serves a different role in keeping you captive in this strange sort of like, it's all a prison, but it's like split up into different small planetoids. So it's like a weird pocket dimension, but it is all one larger prison. And in between each fight, you are fed exposition by your weird rabbit friend. However, this exposition is delivered with like very cryptic language, so it kind of leaves ambitions, goals, and even identities a little as a little bit of a mystery, or at least murky until the end of the game. And the rabbit's words are so vague, and his teleportation-like movement is so erratic that it's not totally clear whether or not he's even real. Beyond that, it's really hard for me to go into any more like character and story elements without getting spoilery. And I would say that that's because the game really focuses on being what it is. And that's not to say the story's bad or that the characters are meaningless, but it really is dressing on what is, more than anything else, a boss rush game. In fact, it has such a strong focus on the boss rush mechanic that there's an auto walk button so that you can just skip the actual act of walking to the next area. It just walks for you, and you're fed the exposition so you can just rest your hands before the next fight. And I would say that strong focus really pays off. So I originally became interested in this game because of the visual aesthetic, like I alluded to earlier. Really specifically the cover art. It features the Vaporwave color palette, which we'll also talk about in Hyper Light Drifter, almost identical in terms of colors. And it places that palette over a cel-shaded environment and characters that sort of resemble like cyberpunk, jet set radio, samurai character designs. And this is also the reason I chose Furi for the Hyperlight Drifter episode, just because of the colors and the character design. While one is a top-down pixelated adventure, the other is 3D, and there's a lot that they still have in common, including like your arsenal. So in Furi, you're equipped with an automatic laser pistol, a sword, and a dash, not entirely unlike the Drifter. Your mechanics don't really end there, though. There's still a few more things that you have access to, one of which being a parry mechanic that is telegraphed visually and with a very distinct like sound effect. And this might be the most important mechanic in the whole game. So like not only does it allow you to slow your opponent's aggression, but a successful parry will actually allow you to heal some of your health, which can really save you in some really hairy situations if you get good at parrying. But it's probably the hardest mechanic to master, but the game truly demands that you master it. And that demand comes in the form of a boss named the Edge. And
The Edge.
The Edge.
That is,
Other players will know who I'm talking about.
That's an intimidating name.
Characters, by the way, are not explicitly named in this game. All these names are coming from the wiki, which I had to look at.
The community kind of did that. Okay.
I think they have official names, like they're in the credits
Gotcha.
with names. But anyways, one of the other great things about this game is the music. Whenever I've talked to people in the past about Furi, everyone specifically mentions the music, and I totally see why. While I'm more partial to something like more low-key, like the Hyperlight Drifter music, Furi also doesn't disappoint and really matches these difficult arena challenges. And yeah, the last thing I want to touch on before I get into a couple of criticisms is how well the game teaches you how to play and how satisfying it is to actually complete a new phase in each boss battle. Dying is punishing, depending on how far you progress, but is also sort of mandatory as you start out. It's impossible to know what to do right away against these bosses that require such intense reaction time. But each time you start to recognize a pattern in one phase, that recognition really sets you up for the rest of the phases of the boss, and in some cases allows you to extrapolate against other bosses. No one boss is identical in any way in terms of combat, but you can start to see how the machine works, I guess is how I would put it. But yeah, pretty much all the movements and mechanics in this game feel really good to perform. So in short, this game is really fun. I don't really consider myself like a god gamer or anything, and I have no desire to be perceived that way. But I will say that I've played a lot of games that are considered to be quite difficult by other people. I'm thinking of like certain challenges in Hyperlight Drifter, areas of Hollow Knight.
Mega Man, you're big into Mega Man,
Yeah.
even though those aren't technically indie games, but
Yeah.
you have a big history with those.
Exactly. All that being said, Furi is the hardest game I've ever played in my damn life.
Really?
It is so hard.
Wow.
I
That's crazy.
Like, I haven't beaten Hollow Knight's God Home in its entirety, but my focus and effort to success ratio is so different with Furi. Most of the bosses are difficult, but fair within the context of the game. But there are a couple of bosses that are absolutely brutal, and one that I would consider absolutely unreasonable. I was working on him for over an hour and a half, totally sober, and my wrists still hurt.
Well, that's the problem is you didn't have like one or two drinks in you to help you be focused. So that's the problem.
Sometimes I would argue that helps.
I think scientifically has been proven, but in this case,
in this case, it's totally a reaction time thing, and I would not have succeeded.
Okay.
All
your full faculties with you.
Yeah, for that one alone. My other criticism would be with the camera. It's very intentional the way it's handled, but your camera is largely fixed. It's a 3D game, but you have no ability to orbit your camera around your character. It's not a huge deal, but there are a couple of fights, namely with the sniper boss, that create difficulty, I think unintentionally, by placing enemies in attack range, but just off screen because of the way the camera is positioned. So in the end, I did a lot of swearing, I did a lot of sweating, and I had a really hard time, but I still want to give this game an 8.5 out of 10. It's so difficult, and I was still playing it down to basically the last minute. But you can really tell how much care went into boss design and combat Like, so much care went into that, and it's really hard to make really good boss fights, but Furi nails it with most of them. Music's good. Visuals are one of my favorite aesthetics. It's super hard, and I'm super relieved that I played it on the Switch, as there's no obligation to a trophy system.
Yeah, I think the trophies for this sound like they would be very difficult.
Oh,
You looked into that?
I did look into that. There's speedrun trophies. There's S-rank trophies.
No. Okay, so on that topic, S-ranking, speedrunning, do you feel like the game does do a good job of encouraging you to kind of perfect what you're doing, chasing high scores, those kinds of things? Is there a good incentive for doing that beyond an achievement or a trophy?
In your normal game mode, you actually don't really have access to those statistics. So those are part of a separate game mode that you unlock after beating the game the first time.
Okay.
So I feel no obligation to them, and I am relieved for that.
Okay. Now, this whole idea of a boss rush is usually a mode that you find in games that have bosses, right?
Yep.
And it's usually something you access after you finish the main story or whatever. Roll credits on the game, you get a boss rush mode maybe. Hyperlight Drifter, even, our featured review today, has a boss rush mode. Does this game feel like it's kind of a fraction of another game? Does it feel like it's a portion of a game that was plucked out of like a bigger title, or do you think it justifies, what it's doing?
I don't think so. I don't think there's anything wrong with just being what you are. Okay. I think if anything, they could have stripped it down a little bit more and made it just the boss rush. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You don't need the story. The story does give you depth and maybe even, internal conflict for some of the choices that you make in the game. But I think it really excels at being a boss rush, and it could have taken out all the story, and my score probably wouldn't really have changed.
Well, that is Furi. It was developed by the Game Bakers, and it looks like it's available on PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. Did I get all those right?
Yep, and I would personally recommend playing it on anything but the Switch, actually. If you do not have the compulsion to get all the trophies or whatever, play it on anything but the Switch. My original model Switch was dropping just like giant chunks of frames multiple times.
That's important in a fast kinetic fighting game, basically.
Bad news, lost a couple of rounds because of it.
Do you happen to have a good estimate of like the most number of attempts against the hardest boss? Could you put a number to it?
Oh God. I know the hardest boss. Like I said, I was on him for an hour and a half. That probably amounts to at least 60 attempts.
Oh my goodness. Well, if that sounds like a good challenge to you listeners, then maybe check out Furi. If you want to sweat a little bit, do not check out My Secret Game, because My Secret Game is a polar opposite to Furi.
Okay.
My Secret Game this episode is The Gardens Between. Have you heard of this?
The name does not sound familiar, but let's take a look.
I'm sending you a gameplay trailer, and then I'm also sending you a longer gameplay video. So The Gardens Between is a 2018 puzzle game about two kids named Arena and Frent, who are childhood friends, who hide in their treehouse during a rainstorm. This is the night before a life-changing event, and the two explore abstract worlds representing shared memories of their friendship. So in this game, you play as these kids, Arena and Frent, and you play through about 20 different levels. You're walking in these predetermined paths, circling around these abstract memories that they have from their childhood. The perspective is 2.5D. So you're walking in a 2D plane, but there is depth behind the characters at all times. And you're always controlling both of them at the same time. They walk together in the same path. Arena carries a lantern that can pick up spheres of light. In each level, you're trying to carry your light toward the end goal. And when you reach the end goal with the light, it opens a portal, bringing you to the next level. So that's how you keep progressing. And usually the levels, you're walking up a spiral pattern, usually going towards the top of the level. That's how a lot of them are built. As you're walking along these paths, you'll reach obstacles like fog that blocks your path. You'll reach these flowers that suck out your light from your lantern. So you need to find ways to circumvent those obstacles. So Arena's carrying this lantern. Frent, he can activate devices that manipulate the flowers that can suck out your light. He can also control certain objects' flow of time. And in this game, you can walk, you can't really jump, but the main thing you can do, the way you're solving all these puzzles, is you are manipulating time. At any time, you can pause time, you can rewind, you can go back forward. So the gameplay revolves around rewinding time, fast forwarding time, and finding objects to manipulate. The way you manipulate them is independent of time moving itself. Basically, you're moving time forward and backward, trying to find the right objects to interact with so that you can proceed. And sometimes interacting with the right object opens up a path that was previously blocked, dropping a platform, those kinds of solutions. What I liked about this game were the abstract worlds. All these little levels are themed after a certain kind of core memory that these two friends share. So, for example, I mentioned the treehouse that they have, that they go into. That's kind of where this story starts. One of the levels is themed about them building their treehouse. So the time that they shared sawing all the wood. So you'll see planks of wood that you can walk across, and you'll see big saws in the level. There's a level that kind of represents the time they went to the museum. So there's lots of fossils and like dinosaur bones and things. The levels feature other props like tire swings and paint buckets, chalk drawings, televisions. The visuals are packed with details of little props everywhere you traverse. Everything feels thoughtfully placed. The art style is really clean and polished looking. And then there's the vibe of this game. It's a very chill and relaxing experience. It is a puzzle game, but it's very non-stressful. It feels more thoughtful and reminiscent rather than, like puzzling and confusing and obtuse in its puzzles. The friendship is presented very simply. We see scenes at the end of each of the worlds that show a quick glimpse into some of these memories that they share. And then the music is very beautiful. It features a really gentle, calming piano that I found really enjoyable. So some of the things I didn't like about The Gardens Between, and this is a rare criticism that you'll hear from me. You'll almost never hear me say this about a game, but I think the game is too short. I could have used maybe about 2 more hours. The game takes only about 2 hours to play from start to finish. It's only about 20 levels. So I think you could have almost doubled that, and it would have been still like a really great, fresh experience all the way through. The story is pretty bare bones. We don't know a lot about the characters other than their hobbies and games and just the fact that they are friends. They never talk or anything. You just kind of see scenes with them. And then in the gameplay, they're just kind of walking around. They don't remark anything to each other. And then a few of the puzzles, although I said this was a relaxing puzzle game, just a few puzzles involved some lateral thinking that seemed a bit unfair. And I did have to look up one solution about halfway through. And then once I saw it, I was like, I don't know if I would have figured that out for maybe another 20, 30 minutes. So just a couple nitpicks with that. But overall, The Gardens Between, it's a very calming puzzle game with beautiful abstract worlds. The manipulation of time feels really satisfying. It made me think about my own childhood friendships as well. I had some similar experiences to the two characters here. There's a final moment that the game builds up to that I won't spoil here, but I had a personal reaction to that moment because I had something very similar happen to me with a childhood friend. So that moment hit very hard for me. So The Gardens Between, I recommend this. I think you would really enjoy this, Disco. It's a great game to kind of sit down and you can knock it out in 1 or 2 sittings. And I give it an 8 out of 10. It's really good.
Wow,
so yeah,
that's one of your highest secret game scores to date.
Yeah, really recommend that one. Super One More Jump, I think I gave an 8 out of 10. Can't remember them all off the top of my head at this moment. But yeah, Gardens Between, really solid.
Okay. I want one clarification based on what I'm watching here.
Yeah.
So are you simultaneously controlling 2 characters, or is there like movement path fixed? If you press right on your left stick, are they both moving the same way every time?
Yes. So you cannot have one character go forward in time and one backward in time. They always move together, which I think helps simplify the puzzle design, which might add to why this is such like more of a casual puzzle game, in my opinion, is that the solutions aren't that complex usually. So you're always moving together. You have a predetermined path. If you reach an obstacle, you can no longer progress. And if you reverse time and you kind of back into an obstacle, the game will stop reversing time. You could argue that you're controlling these two characters. You could also argue that really what you're controlling is time in this game.
Okay.
And then when you manipulate certain objects in the world, you might drop down a new path behind you that's like at a fork in the road, for instance. And then when you reverse your characters back to that fork in the road, they automatically know to go down the bridge you just created or the path that you just uncovered, if that makes sense.
So at times when one of the characters is just like stopping to look at something while the other character is still walking, that stopping and looking at something is predetermined.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's a good question. So the game is scripted in that way. Like if a character stops to look at something, usually it's because another character is on a split path and they might be going around like a spiral path that takes them longer to go around or something, or a shorter path or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that character is just waiting up to coincide with a certain place they're supposed to be that the game wants you to try to interact with a certain part of a puzzle. So yeah, if you see a character moving and another character not moving, that's intentional. That's supposed to happen. And that's not an input the player makes.
Okay. And then the other question I had was, are there multiple solutions to some of these puzzles, or are they like one set pathway to get to the end?
I'm thinking back. I think it is just one solution for all the puzzles.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I think you're right. I think I probably will check this out. My secret game for the next episode I don't have it yet, so I might turn this on first and just wrap this one up real quick.
The Gardens Between, it was developed by the Voxel Agents, and it is playable on Windows, Mac, Linux, Switch, PS4, and Xbox One. Those are our secret games, Furi and The Gardens Between. Let's move on to our featured review of Hyperlight Drifter. Hyperlight Drifter is a 2D action-adventure game originally released in 2016. You play as the Drifter who explores a once prosperous world filled with lost history, ancient technology, and violent monsters. Now, in this game, the Drifter explores this central city with access to 4 areas. There's one in each cardinal direction. Each zone has a different atmosphere and group of enemies. There's a boss fight usually at the end of each area, and when you defeat that boss, you gain access to one of 4 terminals that once you open all those, you open a final gateway in the center of town. And in this game, you're using a sword, an array of guns that you find in the world. You can do close range fights. You can do long range fights with enemies. The combat is known for being very challenging. And then you can collect upgrade parts called gear bits to upgrade weapons and maneuvers. Disco, any other parts of like the mechanics of this game that are noteworthy for people who might not be familiar with Hyperlight Drifter?
As the name sort of alludes to, but not quite alludes to, you also have a dash mechanic, which is crucial to just the entire game and really one of my favorite mechanics to use.
Now, Disco, I know going into this recording, I don't want to spoil what you have to say too much, but I know that Hyperlight Drifter is one of your most cherished games you've ever played.
Yes, if you want me to expound on that.
I just want to touch on the fact that I also played this game about 4 years ago. It's almost 4 years ago. And I also really enjoyed it. But just so the audience knows, for the purposes of this recording, we both replayed it recently within the last few weeks. And also, I just want to say up front, since I know you love this game so much, I very much respect your expertise, your insight, your knowledge on this game. So at any time when I'm talking during this review, if you want to hijack what I'm saying for more valuable content, feel free to do so because I really value what you have to say on this game.
Okay.
But, so getting all that out of the way, tell me, why is Hyperlight Drifter special? And what were your overall thoughts as you replayed this game for Underplayed?
Oh boy. Okay. So I would say that this is one of those games where I saw the trailer and instantly fell in love. There's something about all of the sharp edges and the color choices that really drew me in and sort of shaped my taste for the last 5 years, however long this game's been out. Like, whenever I see something that looks like that, I'm into it. There's this game that I haven't turned on yet on Steam, has a lot of those same like sharp edges. Really looking forward to it.
Wadham does have a lot of sharp edges. Yeah, sorry, keep going.
Unsighted uses a lot of those, and I'm really looking forward to finally finishing that. So yeah, it's largely an aesthetic thing, but once I played it, I fell even more in love. The music, just all of it. I'm really into the vaporwave color palette, and I just enjoy the gameplay. Yeah, I love pretty much everything about it. There's like 2 challenges that I kind of hate, I guess. But other than that, to give you an anecdote that I give to anyone when I'm trying to convince them to play Hyperlight Drifter, you know that my favorite franchise is Mega Man.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite video game is a Mega Man game. Like, my top 5 games are all Mega Man games.
Yeah.
If Mega Man was off the face of the earth, Hyperlight Drifter would be my favorite game of all time.
That is what a great way to speak to your admiration for this. That I love hearing how effusive you speak about this game.
And a
it's
lot
so
of
good.
that ties into like what I love about Mega Man anyway. It's just like you can turn it on and beat the game in an afternoon if you want to. Hyperlight Drifter's a little bit longer, but it's one of those games, one of the very few games that I just like, I've done everything in the game. I still turn it on and just play through it for fun.
That's the mark of a game that you love. That's awesome. I don't think I have many games that I can say that about.
I don't either.
I'm the kind of person who picks up a game, even if it's a game I love, I might pick it up for a long time until maybe I want to complete it, maybe get all the achievements or trophies or something, or feel like I've completed all the tasks within the game. But then once I put it down, I rarely return to games because there's just so much to play. So that's fascinating. I don't know if I have a game in this style that I can say the same about. So any other thoughts about the game overall, or what it was like to replay for this time? I know you've played it so many times.
Oh, yeah. I have played it a lot of times. So to like give myself something new, something fresh for this recording, the Switch and I believe the Steam version have an alternate drifter that you can play as. And I hadn't done that mode yet. I was trying to get through, my perfect save file for the regular drifter on the Switch profile. But I decided for this recording, I would turn on the alternate drifter, play as her, and see how different the experience was, or at least play it in a different way than I had in the past. Now, having said that, doing that actual alternate drifter didn't feel that different. Certain things about it were easier, like you have a little bit more range in your melee attacks, but you have less health. So it's like a trade-off, but in the end, it doesn't feel that different, especially when you're using like the animation cancel that we were talking about off air.
Sure.
There's an animation cancel that you can perform to help with combat. Really enjoyable. Love doing it. Super fun. But it feels pretty much the same as just playing as the regular drifter.
Well, now you can say you've played one more option this game offers on at least 1 or 2 platforms.
Yes, absolutely. And I intend to, I didn't 100% it with her. Well, I think I got all the gear bits, which if I did, was the first time I've ever done that without like backtracking.
Wow. Yeah, that's a feat there. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts?
This game rules.
All right. My overall thoughts on Hyperlight Drifter, it's all right. It's all right. No, it's amazing. I think this is an absorbing game that has a world that feels really hopeless, but it somehow also seems calming, maybe?
I think, sorry, I'm already hijacking.
Please hijack.
absolutely incredible score from Disaster Piece.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd mention that.
And
yeah.
that has a lot to do with it.
I can definitely see why, because I think a lot of that almost odd sense of calm and peace that's amidst this really kind of like ugly world, not ugly in that the graphics are ugly, but that there's a lot of violence and blood and monsters everywhere. A lot of that sense is because of the atmospheric music, the way this game really like puts you in a mood. You know, there's a struggle to the world, but there's also beauty to be found. The game is full of striking images. You'll see these titans.
Oh, yeah.
You'll see these structures that are abandoned. You'll see ruins, different species hanging on to what they have and struggling to get by, especially in the central town. The combat is very easy to pick up, but hard to master. There are multiple viable ways to play. You can play more traditionally and kind of safe with lots of sword attacks. You can mix up your sword and gun. Every time you do a sword swipe, it reloads some of your ammunition in your gun. That's a really interesting mechanic because it almost encourages you to experiment. You can try dashing around your enemies and just getting a hit off here and there. The world is conveyed so simply. I love the minimalist style to how the world is shown. Even when you talk to characters, the way they interact with you, they usually show you like just with simple pictures that show up on screen. They'll show like a picture of them maybe arriving in town, and then a second picture of someone who came to like cause them trouble of some kind. And then the third picture is like the aftermath. Maybe they like got beat up by this newcomer, or, you know, maybe they got frozen in ice or something. And that's all, you know, no characters speak. There aren't any words except for some like quick tutorial messages here and there, which I don't know if you can turn off.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most artfully done things in the game. Just literally, those are the only words. Like this button, you know, does the gun, and that you recharge your ammo by hitting things with your sword. That's it.
Yeah.
There's monoliths that you can translate, but you don't get the translation key.
Right.
We had to rely on fans to like go through and translate them, and you can only figure it out when you go online. But
yes. There's a sense of lore that I think I'll get to in a second. But I also wanted to shout out the music by Disaster Piece. That's the stage name of Richard Vreeland, I think is his name. The score is haunting and beautiful. It's like something from a fever dream sometimes. There are secrets abound. You always feel like you're within arm's reach of a secret. It's up to you to explore at your own pace to find what you want. And you can also take or leave the secrets. The game doesn't really punish you per se for not looking for those secrets. You might get more gear bits that can upgrade your weapons and stuff faster, but you could, you know, viably play through this game with just main pathing it, and that's totally fine too. The secrets add to the narrative, though, that this world has lots of lore and technology to uncover, and it really takes work to understand it all. Like you said, there's a community of devoted fans to this game. They have really worked at translating the alien language that they made for this game, and they used kind of process of elimination to figure all that out. Not saying that the average player needs to do all that work to get meaning out of the story, but if you want to put work at it, I think you can get a little bit more than just the vague cutscenes that you're given, because I think the game is just kind of hard to understand, you know, like just going through casually, quote unquote, casually, it's hard to understand, you know, the greater narrative. There's like some kind of a meaning. And I think there's a meaning that we'll get to further in our discussion with Alex Preston, who's like the main creative guy behind this game. The visual style is obviously inspired by 8 and 16-bit games that Alex Preston loves. He and the rest of Heart Machine really knew how to draw upon visual styles and improve them, but remained disciplined enough to portray complex and striking imagery in a really minimal way.
Yeah, the way I like to point it out is that the Drifter, his like legs are just 1 pixel in width.
Yeah.
And so like I would say that the world is really detailed, but it's using such a small canvas to do it.
Yes.
And it's so incredible.
It's very disciplined. So many games would take this 8 and 16-bit direction and perhaps add too much modern stuff, too much modern vision, and then kind of spoil the authenticity of what makes that old era of games special. So this is very much drawing on what makes those games from 20, 30 years ago special, while adding just dashes of modernity to make it really its own thing. Some dislikes I have with the game, because no game is perfect. The secrets can become kind of a pixel hunt. So there are little clues in the environment that might clue you into where some of the secrets are. Sometimes you'll get like a pixel, it seems. The secrets can seem a little too hidden for what they are at times. You might find a really well-hidden secret, and you might only get a health pack. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, I should get a gear bit or like a monolith or something here. A few areas I think just aren't fun. I'm thinking of a section in the northern section with blocks that squish you. Morbidly hard is how I would describe that. Some of the enemies, like the spiders, there are times where you get like, seems like 15 spiders chasing after you. It's like, is that necessary? The lore can be a little too mysterious and ambiguous for me. I really want to understand more about what this all means. So maybe if I were more of a hardcore fan and I took a lot more time, like an exponential amount of time, I could figure it out, but I'm not sure I want to do that. So overall, Hyper Light Drifter, it's fun and challenging. It has a keen sense of mystery and beauty. It is a labor of love by someone who knows what they want to do. It shows throughout. I rate this game a 9 out of 10. And I don't think we didn't get your score.
I didn't give my rating.
Now, when I set this document up that I kind of reference with all my notes, I'll type in our scores as we go along. So I don't know what your secret game is every episode. I'll put in your score for your secret game, which today you gave Furi an 8.5, for example. This is the first time where I put in a score prior to the show because I was confident that you would give Hyper Light Drifter a certain score. And I want to see if I'm right. So what do you score Hyper Light Drifter? I rated it a 9. What do you rate it?
Let's say it together. I give Hyper Light Drifter a 10 out of 10.
Out of 10.
Yeah.
Hey, that is our first game on Underplayed that one of us gave a game a 10. That is so cool.
Yeah.
So, all right. Any reactions to what I said?
So I understand your criticisms and agree with especially the pixel hunt one. And I would say that, even though it doesn't fix some of the problems, we're actually still living in a more blessed timeline, because if you're playing Hyper Light Drifter, you'll notice that little like square pattern next to like hidden walls or whatever. Those used to not be there.
Yeah,
in the original release of the game.
Yeah, my understanding is that after they released this game, they actually had several like pretty good patches that addressed the ability to find secrets. So it used to be worse. It used to be like more cryptic, more hidden, and along with certain things like adding more gear bits into the game.
Yeah.
So,
and I agree. Yeah. So there's still like, I think of 3 specifically off the top of my head that I had to memorize over the multiple times that I played it. Otherwise, they would be near impossible to find. The other thing is that lore, I kind of agree with you and kind of don't. There is still one aspect that I don't totally understand, and that is the dog character that shows up sometimes. I still don't understand what he is or what he represents or if he's real. He kind of feels like what I thought about the rabbit character in Furi.
And he could be something that means something very personal to Alex Preston, which I want to get into right now.
But yeah, otherwise, like I kind of like the ambiguity. And I will preface all that by saying that I think I read what all the monoliths translate to once, and I totally don't remember. Like everything that I know about the lore is mostly just like on the surface of the game. Okay. And I really enjoy it.
Okay, well, digging a little deeper into what this game might mean. So I did research this time before playing. This game was conceived and largely created by Alex Preston. He wanted to make a game like this for a very long time. I don't know if you know about his backstory, Disco.
I know a little bit, yeah.
Okay, so he's dealt with health issues his whole life. I'm going to quote an article from The Guardian where he says, quote, "I've dealt with serious health issues since I was born. Congenital heart disease to start, a plethora of digestive and immune system problems have left me hospitalized on numerous occasions, often near death. This gives me a certain perspective on life and plays into the stories I want to tell." End quote. So in Hyperlight Drifter, the drifter, for example, is suffering from this illness. One of the first things you see is him coughing up blood or some kind of a pink substance, and he seems to be looking for a cure, I think. And all of this is informed by Alex's experiences in life. So my question for you, how do these very personal influences impact how you react to this game? How do they make you feel?
I was going to say they don't specifically make me feel anything, but that's not true. You know me personally. We've been friends for over a decade, and I think I've discussed with you, I have a great fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you watch things like that, just like the helplessness of this seemingly terminal condition, there is a little bit of helplessness, and you do feel a little bit more there. But when you pair that with the care that the game has put into it, you can tell. I think you can tell, even without knowing about Alex Preston, that there's something personal there. Like there is a passion that you can see in the actual construction of the game and the way that it is portrayed, that this is super personal. And then you learn about Alex Preston and it just clicks. It makes so much sense. So,
and all of that culminates with the final boss battle and the final scenes before you roll credits. I actually found myself kind of tearing up this time, especially with that music coming in by a Disaster Piece. All of it blends together so well. And that's part of the beauty for this game for me. Like, even though it is dark and moody and depressing, and it feels like this civilization is just long gone and the world is hopeless, like there's something kind of tragic, but also hopeful at the end. And it's finding that conclusion, coming to a sense of discovery about maybe how you see life without even understanding what any explicit story was, like maybe I wasn't getting any specific story beats or like, a 3-act structure story told to me that I understood. I kind of was feeling those emotions. It's more of an emotional journey, just based on the visuals and what you're hearing.
Yeah.
That was really hitting for me.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way. And maybe, maybe that's why I love it so much. It's a story hasn't been told to me in this way, in such minimal terms, and been so effective at getting the point across.
Well, I think it's a wonderful game. Like we said, it has amazing influences from an old era of games that you just don't see games made like this anymore. If you're a fan of classic games like Link to the Past, that's a huge noted influence on this game. So it's about this very mysterious adventure that I just found myself getting lost in. And I'm glad we got a chance to talk about one of your favorite games of all time, Disco.
Yeah, and I could go on about it. So if you ever want to message me on Twitter and gush about it,
yeah.
I'll follow through. I do want to call out something that I actually see on Twitter pretty regularly. There is this I think it's a board game, but it also has smart device interaction, and it's based on the Hyperlight Drifter world, and you sort of build your own character. You get to choose between being one of the birds or a raccoon or, whatever, one of the lizards. I don't know too much about it because I don't play a lot of board games, but check it out if you can find it. It seems interesting at the very least, and I love that Hyperlight Drifter is big enough to have that sort of auxiliary media.
Yeah, that's cool. Even though we're wrapping up here, I just want to mention it is really cool seeing the support this game had from day one on Kickstarter, seeing the over 24,000 people backing it. They had a goal of it was pretty tiny by game development standards, and they raised just many, an exponential amount over what they had hoped for. And it resulted in a special game and a game with, I think, from what I can tell, a special community. So that'll do for our review of Hyperlight Drifter. You can play it on Nintendo Switch, PS4, Xbox One, PC, Mac, and Linux. Disco rated it a 10.
Yeah, I did.
I rated it a 9. That's the end of this episode of Underplayed. You can find more of our episodes at kzum.org/underplayed. Our music was composed by Jack Rodenberg. Our art comes from Onimochi. My name's BoPo, and you can find me on Twitter at BoPo. That's BO_PO.
And I'm DiscoCola on Twitch and Twitter.
Next time, we'll have 2 more secret games, and our featured review will cover Before Your Eyes, an eye-tracking adventure game developed by Goodbye World Games. Until then, everyone, keep on playing.